Every word I wrote was meant for another woman. Duke Adrian Vermont said it quietly. Not during an argument. Not during anger. Not even during cruelty, which somehow made it worse. Because cruel words spoken in anger occasionally belong to rage. But calm words belong to truth. Or at least truths people believed. The confession settled inside the library between warm firelight and winter rain tapping softly against enormous windows. Rosalie Vermont remained completely still. Across from them, Lucien slowly lowered his teacup. Very slowly. Then closed his eyes. Oh no, not loudly. Not dramatically. Just with the exhausted despair of a man watching history repeat itself. Adrian frowned. What? Lucien stared. Actually stared. Because over years he had witnessed Adrian destroy situations in many creative ways. But this possessed ambition. What? Lucien asked carefully. Exactly made you believe that sentence should leave your mouth? Silence. Absolute silence. Adrian looked confused. Rosalie looked toward the fire. Interesting. No. There it was again. Not interesting. Rosalie looked toward the fire and suddenly seemed very far away. Very quiet. And Adrian immediately felt something uncomfortable move through his chest. Because Rosalie's silence had changed recently. Once upon a time, silence meant thoughtfulness. Now silence increasingly looked like distance. 3 weeks earlier, Vermont Hall workers discovered old storage rooms beneath the East Wing. Forgotten rooms. Dust-covered furniture. Family portraits. Boxes untouched for years. Among them, letters. Hundreds of them. Neatly tied with dark ribbon. Adrian immediately recognized handwriting. His own. Unfortunately, he also recognized the name. Isabella Hawthorne. The woman he nearly married years before Rosalie. The woman who publicly abandoned him. The woman newspapers loved discussing. The woman nobody mentioned anymore. Or at least nobody used to. Until now. Because Rosalie found the letters first. Not intentionally. Mrs. Fenwick simply asked her to review family documents. Then suddenly, boxes, letters, history. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. The strange part? Rosalie never asked questions immediately. Never looked angry. Never accused him. Instead, she simply brought the letters to his study later. Placed them gently on his desk. And said, "You forgot these." Silence. Adrian stared. Then looked up. Then back down. Oh. Rosalie nodded. Yes. Another silence. Then, "Would you like me to burn them?" Adrian looked surprised. What? Rosalie smiled softly. No wife enjoys discovering love letters. No anger. No accusation. No tears. Just honesty. Strangely, that unsettled Adrian. Because he expected discomfort. Expected jealousy. Expected something. Instead, Rosalie simply left. And afterward, something felt wrong. Very wrong. 3 years earlier, Adrian met Rosalie at a train station. Winter. Snow. Delayed travel. Passengers crowded together, becoming increasingly miserable. Adrian remembered sitting alone reviewing documents while silently hating weather. Then suddenly someone sat beside him. Rosalie, holding 2 cups of coffee. You look tragic. Adrian blinked. What? She handed him 1 cup. You look like someone abandoned by happiness. I am reading reports. Rosalie considered him seriously. Then, yes. A pause. Tragic. For reasons Adrian never understood. He laughed. Actually laughed. 3 hours later, he still sat beside her. Then dinner happened. Then letters. Then walks. Then eventually love. Real love. At least Adrian believed so. Back in the present, Rosalie finally spoke. Very softly. Why tell me now? Silence. Adrian looked toward her. What? The letters. She looked at the fire. Not him. The words. Another pause. Why now? Good question. Excellent question. Because honestly, Adrian wasn't entirely sure. Perhaps because he felt guilty. Perhaps because seeing old letters unsettled him. Perhaps because lately Rosalie looked at him differently. Like someone standing beside a door, deciding whether to leave. He hated that feeling. Deeply hated it. So naturally, like many intelligent men behaving stupidly, he handled discomfort terribly. I thought you should know. Rosalie nodded slowly. I see. Silence. Then Adrian continued. Wrong decision. Terrible decision. Those letters were different. Rosalie looked up. How? Adrian leaned back. I was younger. Another pause. More emotional. Another. I wrote things differently. Lucien suddenly sat forward. No. Silence. Adrian frowned. What? No. Lucien pointed dramatically. You're approaching disaster again. I am explaining. No. Lucien looked horrified. You're digging. Rosalie stared quietly. What sort of things? Silence. Adrian hesitated, then shrugged. Poetry. Wonderful. Excellent. Lucien physically covered his face. Oh God. Rosalie blinked once. Poetry. Yes. Silence. Then. You wrote poetry. Yes. Long silence. Very long silence. Because during 4 years of marriage Adrian had never written Rosalie a single letter. Not one. No notes. No poems. No pages tucked inside books. Nothing. Rosalie looked back toward the fire. Very carefully. Very quietly. Oh. And suddenly Adrian felt cold. Because that carried weight. Too much weight. Hours later dinner happened quietly. Too quietly. Rosalie smiled. Spoke politely. Asked servants questions. Everything looked normal. Perfectly normal. Except Adrian kept noticing small things. Rosalie looked distracted. Rosalie stared out windows longer. Rosalie smiled less. Tiny things. Invisible things. Things Adrian usually missed. Usually. Then later that night Adrian entered their room and found Rosalie sitting beside the window. Moonlight spilled softly across her face. Several open trunks sat nearby. Trunks. Plural. Adrian frowned. What are you doing? Rosalie looked up. Smiled gently. Too gently. Always dangerous. Oh. Silence. I was organizing things. Another pause. Winter clothing. Adrian looked at the trunks. Then at her. Something felt wrong again. Very wrong. But exhaustion reached him first. Always exhaustion. So instead of asking another question, he simply nodded. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. The following evening Lucien entered Adrian's study. Stopped. Then stared. Oh no. Adrian frowned. What? Lucien crossed his arms. Have you completely lost your mind? Silence. What? Lucien stared harder. You told your wife old love letters existed. Yes. You told her you wrote poetry. Yes. You told her those words belonged to another woman. Silence. Then. Yes. Absolute silence. Lucien simply stared, long enough to become deeply uncomfortable. Then quietly. Adrian. A pause. When was the last time you wrote something for Rosalie? Silence. Absolute silence. Because suddenly Adrian realized. He didn't know. Didn't remember. Possibly never. Oh no. Oh no. Then a servant appeared at the doorway. Nervous. Very nervous. Your Grace. Adrian looked up. What? The servant swallowed. Her Grace's footman. Silence. Are loading trunks into carriages. And suddenly, for the first time since finding those letters, something inside Adrian dropped straight through the floor. For one full second Adrian simply stared. Not because he misunderstood. Because his mind refused to accept the sentence. Her Grace's footmen are loading trunks into carriages. No. No. Because Rosalie wasn't leaving. Rosalie waited. Rosalie stayed. Rosalie understood. Rosalie. Oh no. Very slowly Adrian stood. Where? The servant blinked. Outside, Your Grace. Then Adrian moved. Fast. Far too fast. The front courtyard of Veerman Hall looked cold beneath winter evening skies. Free carriages waited near the entrance steps. Footmen carried luggage carefully through falling snow. Rosalie's luggage. Not one trunk. Not two. 6. 6 carefully packed trunks lined beside carriage doors. Rosalie stood near the stone staircase wearing a dark green traveling coat. Chestnut hair moving softly in the wind. She wasn't crying. Wasn't shaking. Wasn't angry. She simply looked calm. And suddenly Adrian felt genuine fear. Because calm Rosalie frightened him now. Calm meant she had finished hurting. Finished hoping. Finished waiting. Rosalie. She turned. Saw him. Smiled politely. Politely. God. Not warmly. Not naturally. Politely. You're leaving. Brilliant observation. Absolutely magnificent. Rosalie blinked once. Yes. Silence. Snow drifted softly around them. Adrian looked toward the trunks. Then back at her. Why? Rosalie stared at him for several seconds. Long enough for discomfort to settle heavily in his chest. Then, you really don't know? Silence. Absolute silence. Because suddenly Adrian discovered something horrible. He actually didn't. Not completely. Not fully. Not enough. Rosalie looked toward the carriages. Toward the snow. Anywhere except him. When I found those letters. Her voice remained soft. Very soft. I thought perhaps I would feel jealous. Silence. I thought perhaps I would feel angry. Another pause. But I didn't. She smiled sadly. Do you know what I felt? Adrian said nothing, because suddenly speaking felt dangerous. I felt curious. A pause. Because I kept reading things written by a man I've never met. Silence. The Adrian inside those letters remembered tiny details. Another. He noticed favorite flowers. Another. He wrote poems about rain. Her eyes finally met his. He missed someone after one day apart. Absolute silence. God. God. Because suddenly Adrian remembered. Young Adrian. The letters. The words. Rosalie continued quietly. And I sat there wondering. A pause. Where exactly he went. Wind moved softly through the courtyard. No one spoke. No one moved. Even servants seemed suddenly invisible. Because Adrian finally understood. Not the letters. The wound. Rosalie wasn't hurt because another woman once existed. She was hurt because another version of Adrian existed. A version she never received. I loved you, Adrian said quietly. Rosalie looked at him. I know. 3 words. 3 devastating words. Because she didn't say love. She said loved. Past tense. No. No. Adrian stepped forward. No. Rosalie blinked. No. I mean. God. Words suddenly became impossible. Because for years Adrian handled contracts, negotiations, speeches, thousands of words. Now he couldn't find 5. I still love you. Silence. Rosalie looked down briefly. Then back up. Do you? The question wasn't cruel. Wasn't angry. It was honest. Terribly honest. Because suddenly Adrian realized something awful. If someone asked him last month how Rosalie felt loved, he wouldn't know. What books made her cry? What songs stayed in her head? What dreams had she stopped mentioning? When did she start feeling lonely? He didn't know. He didn't know. And somehow that hurt worse than anything. Rosalie watched realization slowly appear across his face. Then smiled faintly. Sad smile. Tiny smile. You see? Later that night Adrian sat alone in the library. No fire. No tea. Nothing. Just silence. Hours passed. Then Lucien entered quietly. Stopped. Stared. No jokes. Interesting. No. No repeated nonsense. Just silence. Then Lucien sat beside him. She left. Adrian nodded. Silence stretched. Long. Then. I think I loved a memory. Lucien looked toward him. Adrian stared at empty space. I loved who I believed I was. A pause. The man writing letters. Another. But somewhere. He swallowed. I stopped becoming him. Silence. Lucien didn't interrupt. Didn't joke. Didn't rescue him. Because sometimes truth needed room. Adrian looked toward the fireplace. She asked where he went. His voice lowered. I don't know. Lucien sat quietly for a moment. Then. Yes, you do. Adrian looked up. What? Lucien shrugged. He became tired. A pause. He became busy. Another. He became proud. Silence. Then. But Adrian. His brother looked directly at him. Tired people aren't dead. Absolute silence. Because suddenly. Very suddenly. Something shifted. The next morning Adrian did something strange. Actually strange. He entered Rosalie's room. Not because he expected her there. Because he expected absence. Instead, he found books. Pressed flowers. Notes. Little pieces of Rosalie everywhere. Then he found something else. A wooden box near the window. Inside sat folded papers. Letters. Dozens of them. All addressed. To Adrian. Adrian frowned. Opened one. Then froze. Because Rosalie had written letters too. Hundreds of thoughts. Small moments. Days she missed him while he traveled. Funny stories. Tiny details. Things she never said aloud. One read. Today I saw ducks fighting near the lake and immediately thought of you because you'd somehow take their side. Another. I almost woke you tonight because snow started falling and I remembered you once said winter makes the world quieter. Another. You looked exhausted today, so I made tea and pretended it wasn't because I worried. Silence. Absolute silence. Then Adrian reached the final letter. The most recent one. Hands suddenly unsteady. Adrian. I think I kept writing because some part of me hoped one day we'd become people who still spoke through small things. But lately I feel like I'm writing to someone standing in another room with closed doors. And I don't know how to keep knocking forever. No. 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 Because suddenly Adrian understood everything. Rosalie wasn't leaving because another woman once had letters. She was leaving because Rosalie never truly had them. Not from him. Not really. 3 weeks later, Adrian found her. Not immediately. Not dramatically. Because he spent those weeks doing something he never had before. Listening. Reading. Remembering. Learning. He found her near a coastal town bookstore. Of course, a bookstore. Rosalie stood arranging flowers outside beneath afternoon sunlight. She looked up. Saw him. Stopped. Silence stretched. You found me. Yes. Nothing else. No speeches. Not yet. Adrian stepped closer, holding something in his hand. A letter. Rosalie blinked. What is that? Adrian looked down, then back at her. The first thing I've written you. Silence. Absolute silence. Rosalie stared, then stared harder. I spent years thinking grand things mattered, Adrian said quietly. A house. Another pause. A title. Another. Security. He swallowed. And then I spent 3 weeks reading letters from a woman who loved me through ordinary moments. Wind moved softly around them. I forgot ordinary moments were the whole thing. Rosalie looked at him quietly, long enough for his chest to tighten painfully. Then, you wrote me a letter? Adrian nodded. Yes. Silence. Then Rosalie held out her hand. He gave it to her. She read. Slowly. Very slowly. And somewhere halfway through, her eyes filled. Not from heartbreak. Not from sadness. From recognition. Because after 4 years, the man from those old letters finally came home. And this time, he came back for her.